So in this video, I'm going to try and make it really quick, but there's a lot to talk about. If you want, I can make more videos. This is stuff that I've learned over the years about the Ecodiesel, and we're going to focus on fuel correction here. Now, fuel correction is basically the cylinder, the computer is trying to get that cylinder to get to a specific air-fuel ratio. And you can really think of it on this Ecodiesel as the cylinder contribution or performance for each cylinder. So whether it be fuel related, air related, or compression related, these numbers are going to be really important to look at. I personally would look at them every oil change. If I have a scan tool, I'm going to want to look at these numbers and try and keep the numbers under 1.0. If you start getting numbers above 1.0, you have to focus on what to do in that situation. I'll make another video that talks more in depth about that if you guys comment below and want that. But in this situation, we want to keep those numbers below 1.0. We're going to check them cold start at idle and warmed up at idle. It's going to vary, and those numbers are going to go up and down, up and down. Let's say cylinder 4 will go at idle between 0.8 on this vehicle and 1.1. Take a few snapshots, average it out. We got 4 and 6 that were high. We did injector cleaning, Mopar cleaner. We did the procedure with the scan tool to complement that procedure to clean the injectors, and then the numbers were good. It had an underboost code that set very intermittently, every 1,000 miles or so. Sometimes, that is what's necessary to help get the soot off the back of the valves and get rid of some of the excessive soot. If you have air-fuel ratio imbalance in this engine, you're going to have high soot. They go hand in hand. So we can briefly talk about what to do if the cleaning doesn't help. You can move the injector at that point to cylinder 3. If cylinder 3 is high now, then we got an injector issue. Put an injector in it, retest. If it doesn't follow the injector, we got something going on with our compression, most likely. At that point, you need to do a compression test using a known good compression gauge. I'll throw that in there, and a good adapter, because it's deep down in there. It's basically you're taking the injector out and testing it with the injector out, cranking the motor over, follow the service information. But if you have low compression on number 4, it's always a good idea to take your best cylinder, which is on this screen would be cylinder 3, and do a compression test. The minimum spec, I believe, is 310 psi. Don't be surprised for the good cylinder to be around 270, 280, because they have a lot of soot at this point around the rings, and the rings aren't, sealing quite well. Usually the cylinder walls look okay. I'll show you pictures in a minute, but at that point, let's say cylinder 4 was 1.5 to 3.5 milligrams. That's typically what you'll see on like low compression. And we do a compression test, we got 190, 200. You add oil to it, now it's up to a few hundred. At that point, you know that it's time for a motor. I don't know if any rebuilders, comment below if you know of anyone that rebuilds them. By the way, there is no core charge on these engines a lot of times, so that tells you a lot. But so you can also do a cylinder leak down. Maybe your valves are just sticking open from carbon. So no point of replacing an expensive engine if you can just maybe drive it hard or get the carbon off the intake valves if the intake valves are holding open. And also, this engine, it's really hard for it to set a misfire code, so keep that in mind. Real quick, this picture was showing you an extreme example of fuel correction. This is a brand new engine right here at 50,000 miles, got replaced, and the fuel correction numbers are great, so that's really what you're shooting for. But back to the compression issue, if that's an issue, just don't forget to realize that these engines in particular I mean, they can have low compression and still run just fine. You know, they won't shake at idle. They won't have any real symptoms. They might have a little bit of lag to them. That feels like turbo lag, but it really boils down to now we have a domino effect and we've got soot, you know, that's made its way to the cylinder, and now we're just making more soot because we have low compression. Diesel, you know, it gets ignited by cylinder pressure and heat, and if we have low compression, not all of it's going to burn. We're going to have more soot because of it. So it's just a vicious circle. Anyways, I'm going to try and speed this up. Bear with me. This is a hair filter that fell on the ground. That's how much dirt came out of it. Underboost code. This is a high level of soot here in an intake manifold, and this is above average soot compared to other Ecodiesels. Just wanted to show you that picture. If you can shovel it out, you're probably going to be getting some random low compression or soot getting in the turbo for random underboost codes. So this is why you want to look at fuel correction and try and maintain the best air-fuel ratio that you can. Here's a failed fuel filter. You need to be replacing a fuel filter, you know, every 20,000 miles or less. This is an aftermarket fuel filter. It's starting to come apart. Not quite sure why it's starting to come apart, but you definitely don't want to see that in your fuel system. Next slide is going to show you on the left a Mopar fuel filter from the dealership. Highly recommend that fuel filter. It's got two elements. It's water shedding element, the screen that they've added. Didn't always have that. And then they have the main fuel filter, to, you know, on a micron level to grab stuff from the fuel system to clean it. The one on the right is aftermarket. So you be the judge. Not sure which one you would pick, and I know which one I would pick. And in the next slide here, we're going to look at the DPF. Sometimes underboost codes are caused by a restricted DPF, so make sure we're not forgetting to check that. Also, you can also get a domino effect there. DPF cracks, melts down, ceramic gets in the SCR cat, or the SCR cat also is so hot it melts down. At that point, you've got two restrictions. May not set any codes because of the diesel pressure differential sensor, called the DPF sensor, doesn't see a pressure drop when they're both restricted, and that's a real nightmare to diagnose for a lack of power underboost code because the exhaust isn't breathing. This is the back of the intake valve on an underboost code vehicle. There's high soot there. Obviously, that's going to be an issue. You know, how to get that soot out is up to you. What to do about it, you know, would be a good candidate to check compression on that cylinder if the fuel correction numbers are off, and you might end up needing, you know, major engine replacement. This is a 100,000 mile plus Ecodiesel. It had, I believe, underboost code, possibly fuel related codes. We had low compression because we looked at the fuel correction number. We went and did a compression test because, again, the injector wasn't the issue because it didn't move to the cylinder I switched it to. Compression was about 140 psi. We pop the piston out and we see a lot of soot in that cylinder, but not really the piston cylinder so much as the edge of where the rings go. Oil control ring on that cylinder completely packed with soot. So now those holes, my understanding on the oil control ring holes is that that's helping get oil to lubricate the rings. So you're not getting oil because it's packed with soot. Now the rings are going to wear out. This is a cylinder that had low compression. Cross hatching looks good on that cylinder. The cylinder itself isn't worn out on this engine. We have soot at the top, but you know, it's not crazy amounts of soot at the top there. This is what I would be worried about. So I took the two rings off, the top compression ring and the bottom oil control ring. I left the middle one on, and you can see the amount of soot on that top ring that's behind the ring. That's probably not what's, you know, wanting to be going on in that situation. My understanding is you always have a little bit of gas that pushes the ring out. That's why you want a little bit of movement up and down with the rings and avoid behind the ring and in play on the ring, because you want that ring to be pushed outward when combustion occurs. And if that's not happening correctly, like soot, for example, behind that ring, you're going to have some issues. So I just wanted to point this out. This isn't every Ecodiesel. And if your fuel correction numbers are good and you have low compression, probably need to check your gauge. Some of these engines will have under spec compression and not have any codes, and maybe not even have drivability issues. Maybe the spec in the book is wrong, but 310 psi for a diesel seems right for cranking compression. That's a fuel return test that can be done, but it's easier just to move the injector to see if it follows using the scan tool. And I think that's pretty much it. There's some metal from a CP4 pump failure that can cause metal in the injectors and high return codes. High fuel correction numbers. But the takeaway in this video is look at your fuel correction numbers. Very important tool to diagnose on the Ecodiesel. And yes, you can have low compression. You need to be worried about low compression if you have excess soot, excess regions, etc., etc. Should be kind of obvious why you need to worry about low compression. Overall, you know, I'm a fan of the Ecodiesel. I think it was a well-designed engine. I just think the EGR system is its downfall. They've made big improvements on the Generation 3 Ecodiesel, so I think people will end up being happier with that. Time will tell. So anyways, thank you for watching.